The sun hung low in the sky, casting golden light over the sprawling farmland. Rows of corn swayed gently in the breeze, the earthy scent of freshly tilled soil mixing with the faint aroma of hay. The rhythmic clucking of hens and the distant lowing of cattle provided the comforting soundtrack of home. This land had been in my family for generations, long before the suburban development sprouted up on its borders like an invasive weed. I was adjusting a section of the fence near the property line when I heard it, that unmistakable nasally voice cutting through the afternoon air like nails on a chalkboard. "Excuse me." "Yes, you." I turned slowly, already bracing myself. Standing just beyond the fence was Karen. Not just any Karen, the Karen. The self-appointed queen of the HOA, the one who believed the entire neighborhood should bend to her will. Arms crossed, short platinum bob perfectly in place, and an expression of barely contained disdain stretched across her face. "You can't just let this mess spread all over the place," she said, waving a manicured hand at the fence as if the mere sight of it offended her. I blinked. "Mess," she scoffed. "Yes, this eyesore. The fence is uneven, the barn is an ugly shade of red, and don't get me started on the," she wrinkled her nose, "smell. Honestly, I don't know how the HOA has allowed this to continue. It's bringing down property values." I exhaled slowly, forcing a polite tone. "The farm isn't under HOA jurisdiction, Karen. It predates the neighborhood by decades. You know this." She pursed her lips. "That's debatable." "No, it's not." Karen wasn't one to let facts get in the way of her manufactured authority. She gave a condescending sigh, stepping closer. "Listen, I understand that you've been grandfathered in, but surely you can see how inconsiderate this is to the rest of us. We have standards here. Aesthetics matter." I leaned on the fence post, staring at her with thinly veiled exhaustion. "I'm not changing anything. This farm is my home. It's staying exactly as it is." Her lips pressed into a thin line. "Well, that's unfortunate. But I'm sure the HOA will have something to say about that." I let out a short laugh. "You keep saying that like it matters." Karen's eyes narrowed. She was losing ground and she knew it. She changed tactics, plastering on a tight, artificial smile. "You know, if you ever decide to sell, I know some buyers who would love to develop this land properly. It would be a win-win for everyone. You could finally move somewhere more fitting." I straightened, my grip tightening on the fence. "I'm not selling." Her smile flickered. "Well, we'll see about that." She turned on her heel and strode away, the click of her expensive heels sharp against the pavement. I watched her go, shaking my head. Karen had made it her mission to find a way to control the farm. HOA regulations, noise complaints, fabricated violations. She tried it all. But nothing ever stuck because legally she had no power here. That should have been the end of it. Except Karen wasn't the type to accept defeat. The next morning I was in the barn tending to the horses when my phone buzzed. A text from my neighbor, Todd. "Heads up. Karen's at it again. HOA meeting last night, she's pushing to have your farm labeled as a nuisance property." I rolled my eyes. Typical. I typed back a quick response. She can push all she wants. Doesn't change anything. Todd's next message made me pause. This time she's serious. She mentioned legal action. Also, she called the city about unauthorized livestock. I cursed under my breath. Karen had always been a nuisance, but now she was trying to make things official. I stepped outside just as a black SUV rolled to a stop in front of my property. The tinted windows slid down, revealing Karen's ever-smug expression. "Morning," she said sweetly. "Expecting company?" I folded my arms. "No. Should I be?" She sighed dramatically. "Well, it's just, after yesterday I felt it was my civic duty to report certain concerns to the proper authorities. You understand, don't you? It's nothing personal." I frowned. "What did you do?" Before she could answer, I heard the distant wail of sirens. I turned toward the road just as a police cruiser pulled up, lights flashing. Karen's expression lit up in satisfaction. "Oh my," she said, feigning surprise. "What a coincidence." The officer stepped out of the vehicle, adjusting his belt. Karen, already preening, sauntered toward him. "Officer, thank you for responding so quickly," she gushed. "I called because I was deeply concerned about illegal livestock and possible zoning violations. You understand, of course. The safety of our community is at stake." I barely heard her over the rush of blood in my ears. Because I recognized the officer immediately. Sheriff. Badge gleaming in the sunlight. A face I knew like my own. My uncle. Karen, still mid-rant, hadn't noticed the sharp glint of amusement in his eyes as he turned toward me. "Well," he said, crossing his arms. Looks like we've got a real emergency here. A slow grin crept across my uncle's face as he took in the scene. The flashing lights, the self-satisfied smirk on Karen's face, the sheer absurdity of it all. He shifted his stance, resting one hand on his belt, the other adjusting his sunglasses. Well, he said, his voice thick with amusement. Looks like we've got a real emergency on our hands. Karen, oblivious to the sarcasm laced in his tone, beamed. Oh, Sheriff, I knew you'd understand. She placed a hand over her chest, as if personally burdened by the weight of her civic duty. This farm is completely out of control. There are unauthorized animals, the property is a disgrace, and frankly, the whole operation is a health hazard. I called because I knew something had to be done immediately. Uncle Mike let out a thoughtful hum, nodding slowly as he surveyed the farm. His eyes lingered on the perfectly maintained fields, the sturdy barn, the neatly fenced enclosures. Then he turned back to Karen, rubbing his chin. So, just to clarify, he said, his voice measured, you called 911, over some cows? Karen's smile faltered slightly. And the chickens? And the smell? And, she gestured vaguely, searching for something else to add, the overall aesthetic violation. Uncle Mike exhaled sharply, a sound that might have been a laugh if he hadn't been working so hard to contain it. He looked at me, then back at Karen. Ma'am, do you realize that 911 is for emergencies? His voice remained calm, but there was a slight edge to it now. Karen blinked. This is an emergency. This, she flung her arms toward the farm as if it were a crime scene, is unacceptable. There are rules in this neighborhood, Sheriff, and he is in direct violation of them. I folded my arms, waiting for it. My uncle let out a long, exaggerated sigh, then turned to me with mock severity. Son, I'm gonna have to ask you a real important question. I raised a brow. All right. He took a step forward, lowering his voice as if preparing to interrogate me. Do you have a valid permit for these chickens? The laughter that bubbled up in my chest nearly broke free, but I forced a straight face. I sure do. His brows lifted. And for the cattle? Yup. Zoning paperwork up to date? Been in order since my granddad owned the place. He whistled, shaking his head. Well now, that sure is unfortunate for some folks. Karen's mouth opened, then shut. Her eyes darted between us, confusion creeping into her expression. What do you mean? Uncle Mike turned to her, adjusting his belt with slow, deliberate movements. I mean, this farm has been legally established for longer than the HOA has existed. And, he added, his tone almost lazy, since the farm was here first, it's not subject to HOA rules. That's how the law works. Karen's lips parted, but no sound came out. The color in her face shifted from smug pink to blotchy red. That's not possible, she finally managed, her voice tight. It's part of the neighborhood. It should follow the same rules. No, ma'am, Uncle Mike said smoothly. That's not how property law works. And, he added, leveling her with a pointed look, you just wasted law enforcement resources over something that isn't a crime. Karen's face twisted. I was reporting a violation. No, you were making a nuisance call, he corrected. His easy demeanor didn't change, but there was no mistaking the firm authority in his voice. And unless you've got some actual, tangible evidence of a real law being broken, I'd suggest you stop harassing my nephew. The weight of the word harassment hit Karen like a slap. A few neighbors had gathered nearby, drawn by the sight of flashing lights, and now they murmured amongst themselves. Karen straightened, lifting her chin. This isn't harassment. This is about maintaining property values. My uncle snorted. Lady, you're standing on a dirt road in front of a farm that pays more in property taxes than your entire HOA committee combined. The murmuring grew louder. Karen's eyes darted around, realizing too late that her audience was turning against her. This isn't over, she sputtered, gripping the strap of her designer handbag like a lifeline. Actually, it is, Uncle Mike countered. And if you keep up these false reports, I'll be filing a report of my own. He smiled. For misuse of emergency services. Karen took an instinctive step back. You wouldn't. Try me. A heavy silence settled between them. For the first time, Karen looked unsure, her carefully constructed authority unraveling right in front of her. She glanced at the neighbors, some of whom were whispering, others openly shaking their heads. She had miscalculated. Badly. Finally, with a huff, she turned on her heel and stormed back toward her SUV, slamming the door behind her. The tires kicked up dust as she sped off, her exit as dramatic as her arrival. My uncle turned to me, shaking his head with an amused sigh. That woman's got a real talent for making enemies. I exhaled, finally allowing the laugh that had been threatening to escape. She's been at this for months. She just keeps pushing. Uncle Mike gave me a knowing look. She's not done. That sobered me. You think she's gonna try something else? He glanced at the disappearing SUV, then back at me. People like that? They don't take losses well. His expression darkened slightly. She thought she had power here. Now that she knows she doesn't, she's gonna come back harder. I nodded slowly. As much as I wanted to believe Karen would back off, I knew better. She wasn't the type to accept defeat gracefully. Uncle Mike clapped me on the shoulder. You handled yourself well. But keep your eyes open. This isn't over. I already knew that. And I had a feeling the next move Karen made was going to be worse than anything she'd tried before. For a few weeks, Karen was silent. No surprise visits. No complaints filed with the city. No smug glances from across the street as I worked in the fields. It was almost peaceful. Almost. But I knew better than to believe it was over. Karen wasn't the type to let things go. She was the type to retreat, regroup, and come back swinging. And that's exactly what she did. It started on a Monday morning. I had just finished feeding the horses when my phone buzzed. A notification from the county website. My heart sank the second I read the headline. Local farm facing zoning dispute, possible forced relocation. I stared at the screen, reading the words over and over again, hoping I had misunderstood. I hadn't. Somehow, Karen had found a way to escalate things beyond petty complaints and straight into bureaucratic warfare. By the time I made it inside, my phone was already ringing. It was Todd. Man, have you seen the news? He asked, his voice laced with disbelief. Yeah, I just saw it, I said, rubbing a hand over my face. She's trying to get the county to reclassify your land as residential. If she pulls it off, your farm gets shut down. My stomach twisted. This was worse than I thought. HOA rules meant nothing to me, but county zoning laws? That was another beast entirely. If Karen convinced the county to rezone the area, my farm would be in violation. Fines, restrictions, even forced relocation. It could all be on the table. She's been busy, Todd continued. She's got a petition going around. Claims the farm is a nuisance to the community. She's already got some people signing. I clenched my jaw. Of course she did. Some folks in the neighborhood were indifferent, but others had always resented the farm. The noise, the animals, the smell, none of it fit their vision of a pristine suburban paradise. Karen was playing into their hands, convincing them that getting rid of the farm would magically boost their property values. All right, I said, exhaling sharply. Time to fight back. The first step was gathering information. I drove straight to the county office, pushing through the glass doors with a determination I hadn't felt in a long time. The clerk at the front desk looked up, startled. I need to see any zoning applications filed for my property, I said, trying to keep my voice level. She typed into her computer, scanning the screen. It looks like there's a request under review, she said. Filed by the Homeowners Association. I almost laughed at the absurdity. The HOA had no legal authority over my farm, but that hadn't stopped Karen from trying to make an argument. Who's in charge of reviewing it? I asked. She glanced at the screen. The county commissioner. There's a hearing scheduled for next week. A hearing. That meant Karen was taking this public. She wanted an audience. She wanted people to rally behind her, to pressure the county into making a decision. Fine. If it was a fight she wanted, it was a fight she was going to get. I spent the next few days preparing. I gathered every legal document I had, property deeds, zoning approvals, even the historical records proving my farm had been here long before the neighborhood existed. I reached out to local farmers and business owners, explaining what was happening. Some of them agreed to testify on my behalf, arguing that the farm was an essential part of the local economy. The night before the hearing, Uncle Mike showed up at my door. Heard you've got a big day tomorrow, he said, stepping inside. Yeah, I muttered, tossing another document onto the growing pile on my kitchen table. Karen's really outdone herself this time. Uncle Mike pulled out a chair and sat down, watching me for a moment. You ready for this? I nodded. I've got all the paperwork. The law's on my side. He gave me a knowing look. That's not what I asked. I sighed, rubbing my temples. I don't know. I just can't believe it's come to this. She's willing to destroy my family's farm just to get her way. That's what people like her do, he said. They don't care who they hurt as long as they win. I swallowed hard. She's got the whole HOA behind her. And you've got the truth, he countered. Don't forget that. I nodded slowly, his words settling something inside me. The next morning I walked into the county hearing with my head held high. The meeting room was packed. Neighbors, city officials, even a few local reporters who had caught wind of the story. Karen sat near the front, surrounded by her loyal supporters, her expression smug. The commissioner cleared his throat. We're here today to discuss a proposed zoning change affecting the farmland at the edge of the Oak Ridge development. Karen stood immediately, smoothing her blouse as she addressed the room. This farm is a relic of the past, she began, her voice dripping with manufactured concern. Our neighborhood has grown. Times have changed. We need to think about the future of our community. A few people murmured in agreement. Karen continued, her confidence growing. The presence of livestock, the outdated buildings, she wrinkled her nose, frankly unpleasant smells are affecting the quality of life for residents. We have an opportunity here to modernize our neighborhood, to make it more appealing for families and investors. She sat down, looking pleased with herself. The commissioner turned to me. Mr. Callahan, do you have a response? I stood, feeling the weight of every eye in the room. This farm isn't just a piece of land, I said. It's history. It's livelihood. My family has worked this soil for generations. We provide fresh produce, dairy and livestock not just for this town, but for surrounding areas. We employ local workers. We contribute to the economy. I glanced at the crowd. Some of them looked uncertain now, shifting in their seats. I continued, my voice steady. And legally speaking, this farm is protected. The zoning laws haven't changed, and they can't be changed just to suit the whims of a few people who don't like the smell of hard work. A few scattered chuckles rippled through the room. Even the commissioner's lips twitched. I turned directly to Karen. You moved in knowing this farm existed. You don't get to rewrite history just because it doesn't fit your aesthetic. Karen's face darkened. The commissioner leaned forward. Thank you, Mr. Callahan. We'll take all arguments into consideration. I sat down, my heart pounding. Karen looked furious, and something told me she wasn't done yet. The room fell into a heavy silence as the commissioner shuffled his papers, giving Karen one last glance before speaking. After reviewing the facts and hearing both sides, he said, his voice firm, it's clear that this farm is legally zoned and has been for generations. There is no legal basis to reclassify it as residential. He paused, then delivered the final blow. The request for rezoning is officially denied. The words hit Karen like a freight train. Her perfectly manicured fingers gripped the edge of the table, her mouth opening and closing as if she couldn't process what had just happened. No, that can't be right, she sputtered. You're making a mistake. The commissioner simply adjusted his glasses. The law is quite clear, ma'am. This farm predates the neighborhood and is exempt from HOA regulations. The zoning remains unchanged. A murmur rippled through the crowd, some disappointed, others relieved. Karen, however, was unraveling before everyone's eyes. You don't understand, she snapped, her voice rising. This farm is ruining our community. The smell, the noise, the ugly barns, it's driving down property values. Do you know how much my house is worth compared to other developments? This is unacceptable. I leaned back, watching her crack. She had spent so much time painting herself as the composed, righteous leader of the HOA. But now, when faced with undeniable defeat, her true self was bleeding through, petty, entitled, desperate. The commissioner simply sighed. Ma'am, this hearing is over. No. Karen shot to her feet, her hands slamming against the table. I won't accept this. She turned, her eyes locking onto me. This isn't over, she hissed. I smirked. It really is. She let out a frustrated shriek and stormed out, the heels of her designer shoes clacking furiously against the floor. The doors swung shut behind her, and just like that, it was done. A slow wave of applause started somewhere in the room, hesitant at first, then growing. I glanced around, surprised to see some of the same neighbors who had been swayed by Karen now nodding in approval. Even the local reporters looked intrigued, jotting down notes. Uncle Mike clapped a firm hand on my shoulder. You handled yourself well, he said, pride evident in his voice. I exhaled, the tension finally starting to leave my body. I hope that's the last we hear from her. He gave a short laugh. Oh, she'll be back. People like her don't disappear quietly. I wanted to believe it was over. But deep down I knew better. Sure enough, Karen wasn't finished. The next morning, I woke to an ear-piercing screech outside my window. I jolted upright, my heart pounding. A second later, I heard it again, an unhinged, furious scream. I threw on my boots and rushed outside. Karen stood at the edge of my field, her expensive white blouse smeared with mud, her perfectly coiffed hair hanging in wild strands. She looked completely unhinged. Behind her, my gate stood wide open. And my cows, my entire herd, were loose, wandering into the neighborhood. My stomach dropped. I stormed toward her. "What the hell did you do?" She pointed a shaking finger at me, her face red with fury. "This is your fault." I barely heard her. My brain was already piecing it together. She had come onto my property in the middle of the night, probably planning some last-ditch sabotage. Maybe she thought letting the cows loose would get me in trouble. Maybe she thought it would force me to shut down. Instead, she had learned the hard way that a herd of cattle doesn't take kindly to entitled trespassers. My biggest bull, Diesel, stood a few feet away, snorting aggressively. His thick coat was splattered with mud, his massive head lowering in warning. Karen, in her pristine designer outfit, must have tried shooing them, or worse, running from them. And the second she panicked, they chased her straight into the dirt. It was poetic justice. The first of my neighbors began stepping outside, phones in hand, recording the spectacle. "Callahan's cows are in the street," someone shouted. Another neighbor laughed. "And Karen's the one who let him out." The realization hit her like a slap. She spun in a circle, taking in the growing crowd, the flashing phone cameras, the sheer ridiculousness of the situation. "You," she pointed wildly at me, her voice shaking, "you did this on purpose." I barked out a laugh. "You're the one who broke into my property, Karen?" Her face twisted in rage. "You can't prove that." But before I could even reply, Uncle Mike's patrol car pulled up, tires crunching against the dirt. He stepped out, adjusting his hat, and took in the scene with a slow, knowing smirk. "Mornin'," he drawled. Karen froze. Uncle Mike turned to me. "Son, seems like you've got some loose livestock." I nodded. "Looks like someone let him out." He turned to Karen. "That true?" She swallowed, her entire body trembling. "This is an accident," she stammered. I was just..." Uncle Mike held up a hand. "Let me stop you there." His voice turned sharp. "Trespassing. Destruction of property. Endangering livestock." He cocked his head. "That's a whole mess of crimes." Karen opened her mouth, then shut it. She knew. She knew she was caught. And the neighbors knew it too. The phones were still recording. Uncle Mike sighed. "Turn around, Karen." Her face went white. You can't arrest me," she whispered. He gave her a slow, almost pitying smile. "Sure can." And then, in front of the entire neighborhood, Sheriff Mike Callahan cuffed Karen, the self-proclaimed queen of the HOA, and read her rights as the cameras rolled. As he led her toward the patrol car, she shrieked, twisting in his grip. "You can't do this to me. I'll sue all of you." Uncle Mike just chuckled. Yeah. You tell that to the judge." The door slammed shut, muffling her furious screams. The crowd erupted into cheers. Todd jogged over, grinning. "Dude, that was the best thing I've ever seen." I exhaled, shaking my head in disbelief. "I can't believe she actually did it." Uncle Mike clapped me on the back as he passed. "She's gonna have plenty of time to think about her mistakes," he said. "Jail cells don't have HOA meetings." I laughed. "Guess the farm wins after all." Todd elbowed me. "Dude, this is gonna be all over the internet." I looked around at the smiling faces, the recording phones, the loose cows now happily grazing on someone's front lawn. Karen had spent months trying to ruin my life. And in the end she had destroyed her own.